You know, we've all got blind spots. I do. But why BS? Why BS your business, your career, your family? And why BS your life? It starts with asking the question. But it's really about living it. And that is what this podcast is all about.
This is YBS, Your Blind Spot with Tanner Gears.
I'm so happy to be here, especially happy to be with you today, Tanner. You're so inspiring.
That means the world to me, Carol. It's, when people said, why do you speak? Why do you do everything that you do? You got so much going on. I said, if I change the life of one person, if one person can see the light like I have, then everything is worthwhile. It's all about creating legacy. And you have quite the interesting story yourself. You're creating a legacy. You're helping other people create a legacy. And I think that's the meaningful work that really matters, creators, when we can help ourselves, put ourselves in the right position to help other people. Carol, why don't you fill in some of the gaps beyond just those major bullet points? What do we need to know about you?
Well, I guess what I would want you to know about me is that I am committed to always being my very best. And I'm committed to sharing with others what I know is possible when we live inside a healthy body. And my commitment comes from not living in a healthy body and my body really breaking down and affecting every area of my life. And, from working with clients, I've identified particular quotients of life that make all the difference. And that's what I'm really committed to, Tanner, because I've seen people, I have clients, Tanner, that have put autoimmune disease in remission.
Oh, yeah.
I have a client that reduced insulin by 80%. So when you talk about legacy, clients that have gone, greatly reduced mood-altering medication, gone off high cholesterol and high blood pressure medication. So when you talk about being of service in the world in that way, and you talk about legacy building, like I'm actually giving people the opportunity to see a whole different horizon. Like life literally looks different because of the work that we do together. That's just I feel blessed to be able to do the work I do.
Let food be thy medicine, creators, and thy medicine be thy food. And may Carol be the conduit between you and that medicine. So, we were rapping and slapping hands before this phone call, Carol, and you have got quite a tremendous story. And let's go ahead and dig right in. I love your transformation, your deep dive back to figure this out. You had this problem, and you were determined to, like you said, be your best and uncover these issues. And I don't think you know this, but I had some very similar issues, and that led me down to do the research and figure out what was going on. And ultimately it came back to holistic health, and it begins with nutrition. So what were, some of the struggles that you were dealing with, some of the things you were noticing? I know before the call you had said, you were really even struggling to get through university at a state school. And then later on, you graduated with honors in an Ivy League school. That is quite a huge jump in performance. What were some of the things that you started to notice, or where was the point? Let's start there. What was the point where you knew, hey, this has got to change?
I love that you asked that question. So let me preface that with, I didn't have cancer like there. We hear the stories about people that have healed themselves of cancer.
Sure.
And that's just those are awesome stories. But the work that I do is to help people deal with what I was dealing with. And what I was dealing with is the kind of the things that have become the new normal. It's like we're all percolating at this low level of existence.
Word.
Have we accepted like chronic symptoms are the new normal?
That's right.
Poor health is the new normal. I posted this yesterday. There's people right now in this moment that are in a hospice center that are young, that are begging for one more day of health. And yet we're squandering our time accepting poor health. It's not. And so that's what I was dealing with. I was dealing with things like chronic anxiety, irritable bowel syndrome, leaky gut syndrome, chronic urinary tract infections. Definitely what I didn't know was chronic yeast infections.
Yeah.
But that was the big marker, but I didn't know it. Of course, that's why I dove deep into digestive health. That's definitely an area of expertise for me. So I'm standing, Tanner, one day, the moment is I'm standing at a drugstore. The endocrinologist, now I'm going to all kinds of specialists at this point. That was my life.
Okay.
Going from one specialist to the next to try to find out what's going on here.
Sure.
Why do I feel and look so terrible? And so the specialist recommended that I take Xanax 3 times a day. And I tried because the reality is I had chronic anxiety. Well, I said to the pharmacist, I need to get this prescription, but it's too strong for me. Can you make it a smaller dosage? I'm way too petite. I can't function. She said, I agree, but I can't change that on my own. I have to call the doctor. So we went from the receptionist. She went on the phone. I hear her talking to the receptionist, to the nurse, to the doctor getting on the phone, asking to speak with me. Now, here I am, a petite woman standing on the other side of the counter, full of anxiety. And that I'm thinking, oh, great, he'll understand. And he said, I thought you said you trusted me. And I said, I do, doctor. I said, but it's too strong for me. And he said, look, if you don't take the medication the way I prescribed, you do know what will happen. I said, I don't. He said, that will lead, anxiety leads to panic attacks. And do you know what comes after that? And I said, no, doctor. And he said, suicide.
Jeez.
Now, I don't know if it took a moment or if it took 30 seconds, but I knew right then and there I had to do something. I knew that my whole life was sitting in front of me and nobody was hearing me. And so at a time when when everybody in my world, I should say, lived on the standard American diet, everybody was eating the way everybody still eats today. Nobody was going to a natural physician. Nobody was pursuing anything alternative. And here I am full of anxiety, already feeling like wrong. I pursued, I don't know how I found, but I did. I'll tell you how I found. I started going to an esthetician for skincare because I started breaking out with cysts on my face. Cysts on my face.
Wow.
Now to a young woman, that was just horrifying. And she said that I heard of somebody, a natural physician in New Haven, Connecticut. And so on I went. I knew that was that was the answer to that moment. And that was the beginning of me starting my deep dive into the world of holistic health and healing the body.
Well, you had said something that really resonated with me. I know that a lot of people deal with this, and it's really tough for me because, I just want everybody to be happier, healthier, fuller, and
Correct.
have the resources physically, internally that they need to take it to the next level. And so when someone eats something and they're like, oh man, I got heartburn, or oh man, I have a migraine, or they start coughing. And, we see these things, especially in the wake of when we eat them. And it's really tough. A story that I like to tell is how exterminators were able to get control over rats. And rats are not really intelligent, but intelligent enough to learn. And so they would put this poison down, and the rats would eat it, and they would die, and then other rats would learn. And so that the poison smelled a certain way, and so they'd stop eating it, and then they would try something else, and the rats would learn, and they would stop eating it. And I think it was I forget what prescription it is that we take. It's like Coumadin or something that they started giving to the rats, and the rats would die like 3 or 4 days later. And so they would never put it together that it was from the prescription that they were dying. And I think that we can often have symptoms not just maybe an hour after, but maybe a day later or 2 days later. And we can't really connect the dots between what we ate and how we're feeling the next day. So you're a digestive health expert, and what goes in must come out. Do you have some practical symptoms, or I should say, let's get to this, to the source. What would, eating better in a general sense look like to you? Where can we start to make progress?
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to just say one word about where you were first going, and then I'll go there. Tanner, every symptom is a sign of imbalance.
Love it.
So for us to think we have chronic allergies, if you have a digestive problem, if you have chronic allergies, let's take allergies out of the equation. If you have chronic digestive problems, a little heartburn every now and then, constipation or loose bowels, that's a sign of imbalance.
Let's define imbalance. What do you mean by that?
Something's wrong in the body. So we think of stress as outside of the body.
Right.
But stress also happens inside the body.
Mm-hmm.
So if we'll go right there. If we have chronic constipation, let's go to food. If we're putting food in our body that our body does not recognize, and we're living on food-like substances. We're living on food that the body doesn't recognize as usable fuel. And it cannot remove it. So, Tanner, if there's a bag of garbage sitting out on the back deck that you've not emptied, and it's sitting in 98.7 degrees, and that bag is sealed up, what do we think is going to happen to that waste?
It's probably not going to taste good.
Well,
it's going to rot.
It's actually going to start to rot. And when waste matter starts to rot, then pathogen, bacteria,
right,
yeast and mold and fungus are going to start to grow.
That's right.
How on earth can we think that we can look and feel our best? How do we think that we can focus and concentrate and be creative and wildly successful if we've got that growing inside our body?
It's so important. Like, creators, if we've got this bag of garbage inside of us, we're hauling it around, and, not only does it stink, but, there's this stuff that's growing on it, right?
Well, and see, what we need to know now when I talk about internal stress. So now we have this happening. See, that yeast, all of these bacterias, they actually start to produce carbon acid.
Right.
And it's going to just kind of you start getting all of this bloating.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually can rise up to the brain as it did for me.
Mm.
But the yeast is going to start, we don't have a separate digestive system. We don't have a separate nervous system or a separate immune system. They're all interconnected. And so when we're affected on a cognitive level, if we have issues of depression or emotional imbalance, all I did was cry. And yes, I'm a sensitive being, but not so sensitive like I was then. Now. So when we talk about every symptom is an expression of imbalance, even crying all the time could be a sign.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you say that, because we, the neck bone's connected to the ankle bone, right? And and I think that it's synonymous, that's analogous to how our brain's connected to our guts. The guts often been called the second brain.
Correct.
We have most of our immune function is within the gut, within our intestinal tract, because we have all these and naturally this is an evolutionary process, right, creators? Because we have this tube that goes from the back of our mouth to our butts, and until we put things through the top, and hopefully they come out through the bottom. And during the time between those two orifices, our body does its thing and breaks down that food and tries to use it appropriately. But sometimes we just can't get it broken down, and sometimes that nastiness gets into our blood. And is there any, Carol, I'm just curious, is there any part of our body that doesn't need blood?
Our whole body is impacted by our blood.
Right. So if go ahead.
Do you mind if I give one little bit more science around that?
No, go.
So if the listener takes their pointer finger and their thumb and puts them together and makes a circle.
Yeah.
Let's say that's your digestive wall.
Got it.
Now pick up your other hands and wiggle those four fingers. Now hold those four fingers tightly and imagine those four fingers are all the little villi that are lining the digestive wall.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When we live on a diet that is not real food, it's processed foods, fast foods. We'll leave it at, they're going in, especially the top common toxic trigger food, the top food substance that is causing irritation in the gut wall is gluten. So now that gluten continues to come into the body, but it's abrading. So now just hold those four fingers and rub your other hand across it. It's starting to separate those tight junctures. Now, that waste matter, the undigested food, the bacteria, the mold, the yeast is passing through the digestive wall where it's never supposed to happen.
Right.
So now if we put our two fingers back together at that circle and imagine that wall has been broken, what is on the other side of that circle? The top part of your finger, the top part of that circle is where the immune system sits.
Mm-hmm.
We have a preponderance of autoimmune disease.
Right.
It's almost like we have a new name for an autoimmune disease every day. And then what's on the other side of that immune wall, it's not really a wall, but what's around there, those cells, is the enteric nervous system. And like you said, 95% of the serotonin is produced in the gut wall, 95%. So if we're having a problem in that central tube, of course there's going to be an impact there. So the good news is, that now. The good news is our ultimate goal is to heal that wall, the digestive wall. And that's where you start seeing people like my clients in 3 weeks' time reducing her insulin in 3 weeks by 80%, or reducing reducing, mood issues, issues of depression, reducing the medication because we've started to heal that gut wall.
What are some of the ways, like, you and I are on the same page, right? Because
yes.
It's so important to me, and I understand. People ask me like, "Oh, are you still gluten free?" And it's like, I was like, "Well, why are you gluten free?" And it's like, I've gotten DNA tests, right? I'm not gluten intolerant, if you will. I'm not celiac. Creators, that's the autoimmune disease where literally those villi that Carol was talking about are burned down by gluten, and
Right.
and I said, no, I'm not sensitive to that, but I do know what I do when I eat gluten, when I'm eating stuff all the time like that, and I do know how I am when I'm not, and when I'm not, I'm way better. I heal faster. I recover faster. I sleep harder. I have more energy, and my brain is functioning better. And I think that was getting back to, how you were able to go to an Ivy League school and crush it. But, we've underlined the, why we should heal our guts. How do we go about doing that?
So there's, it's kind of simple. The sayings, it's simple, but not necessarily easy. But, in the world of, you take food in, you get food out.
Right.
So so we've got to take it in and we've got to get it out. We're not getting it out. So we've got to start eating foods that our body can get out. And so, I have a playful little phrase that I say, the Holy Trinity. And the Holy Trinity, of course, is the WHOLLY Trinity. And my top recommendation is green juice.
Okay.
Green juice. Why? Let's say you have a digestive problem, and let's say your absorption and your assimilation processes are really affected by this breakdown in your digestive system. You could eat organic all day long, organic wheat, organic cheese, organic this, that. You could be eating these things and you're not getting a bit of it.
Right.
I know that path because I've been there.
Right.
Green juice requires no digestive fire, Tanner. So it's almost like an IV that you're actually getting nutrients into your body. You're bypassing the digestive wall. So now you're doing two things. You're not you're not asking your digestive system to work really hard to digest anything because you're just putting juice in.
Stress.
You're reducing that because You're just, right. Because you're now getting nutrients into your body, which really pivots on why are people overeating. It's because they're eating food that they're not getting nutrition. So the body's still starving and the body still wants lots of food. And you keep eating more pizza. Well, the body, how we all have those moments when we can reflect on we're eating, but we're not hungry. We're stuffed. And we still want to eat.
Yeah.
It's because we're eating foods that are not nourishing us. And if we are eating foods that are nourishing us, it's all about balance. But what are we going to do? So let's go back to the Holy Trinity. So let's say you don't have a juicer. You could go to experiment with this. You could go to a Whole Foods or a natural health food store and get a cold pressed juice. Some of the brands are Blueprint, Suja, Evolution. These are cold pressed juices. And when I say cold pressed, that means they are not processed.
Right.
Some of these other brands, which I don't want to name to cause trouble, but some of these other brands that are processed are loaded with sugar and there's no nutritional value left.
I'll say it. Naked.
Correct. Exactly. Those are not, there's no nutrition left there. and you're pouring sugar that has no fiber left in it. See, now let's go to the smoothie. The benefit. So now we know the value of the green juice. It's going to really help you heal your body and up level you getting nutrients and vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients like live energy from the sun, all the chlorophyll in the green juices. That's live energy. So we know the value of that. That's why that's my number one recommendation.
Before we move on through the Holy Trinity, if I don't have a juicer right now, but maybe I'm like, hey, I'm feeling like this. I'm feeling a little bloated. I'm feeling a little, I get a couple senior moments, and I'm only in my 30s. I think that this is resonating with me.
Yes.
Could I get can I start to make progress today with maybe like a blender? Could I throw some veggies into a blender? And I know it's not going to be as great as a juicer, but will I make progress with a blender?
Absolutely. And that's where my next phase that I was going to. So the Holy Trinity is green juice, green smoothie, green salad.
Oh, got it.
So the green smoothie, the benefit of the green smoothie is you're going to get more sustenance from that because you're removing the fiber. In a green smoothie, you could put more fruit than you would a juice in a juice. If you were making it at home, if you've got some health issues, you want to reduce even natural sugar because the yeast and the overgrowth of yeast is called candida.
Yep. And
loves sugar.
That's what got in your brain.
Exactly. Sugar took me to my knees. Absolutely. Oh yeah.
Doesn't it bring all of us to our knees? Oh my God. So okay, so juicer veggies, and if we have a blender, we can maybe throw in some fruits along with the veggies.
And ideally heavy on berries because berries are low in sugar.
Right.
But
strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, the kinds of, a classic smoothie that I make would be almond milk, spinach, or romaine. If you're going, please do note that you want to alternate the greens. Alternating greens is the way to go. And then I put in, I sometimes put a whole bag of frozen 12 ounces of frozen strawberries if they're not in season. Wow.
And then I'll put in half an avocado, and then I'll experiment. I don't experiment. I mean, at this point I've got a cupboard full of them, but, put some maca or some goji berries, some of these superfoods, but the real superfoods. Don't get too caught up in all of these packaged superfoods. They're packaged. They're processed. Mm-hmm. There's some denigration to what the original value of that was. I don't overemphasize those. Yes, I do use especially maca. That's really great for the endocrine system, but really great for balancing hormones. But my focus always, always, always comes back to whole food.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The avocado makes it super smooth, super creamy. And, depending on what your wallet looks like, my first recommendation is a Vitamix. It's an investment. I've had mine over 10 years.
Yes.
If you can't afford a Vitamix when you go and price them and you say, no, I'm not ready for that investment yet, then, you can buy a NutriBullet. Buy a good NutriBullet. I think that there's different levels of them, and you want to buy a good one because you're going to get it's going to break down the fiber of the spinach and the berries better for you to have a creamier. You'll enjoy it more.
Yep. So,
and then
before we move on, before we move on, is there so we got the Vitamix or the NutriBullet, and Vitamix, I think you have to get online. They don't sell those at Target or Walmart, but do you?
Who does those? Like, I think I hear of Costco in these type of Costco types of places have them.
Perfect. Oh, well, then, there's a Costco everywhere. So, do you recommend a specific type of juicer?
I do, and the one that I recommend is the one I know that gets used. So Tanner, there are juicers that can go up to $2,500.
Yeah.
They're brilliant, they're amazing, but if it takes you too much time, you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
And the one that exists out in the health food world, in the circles that I move, is the Juice Fountain Plus. It's made by Breville, Breville.
Yes.
And I'm going to tell you how to purchase it.
Perfect.
You're going to get the 20% coupon for Bed Bath & Beyond. And you're going to go to Bed Bath & Beyond and get the 20% off. It's $150 and you'll get it for $120.
Not too shabby.
But I have timed it for my clients. If people get kicking, see, we're also disconnected that 12 minutes all of a sudden is too much time for the morning. If 12 minutes is too much time for you to take to honor your body, then we need to talk about other practices that can help you recenter into yourself. But the juice, I have timed rinsing off organic fruits and vegetables quickly. I don't, I'm not hypering out on it because it's all pretty much organic. And pushing it through the juicer and even washing the components. I have timed it down to 12 minutes.
It's now
that's intentional. That's intentional. Yes. Could it take you 15 or 20 minutes if you're not being intentional and focusing? Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, if you're hustling, you can get through it. But getting back to the investment of time, it's very much, I think people can appreciate, investing in, 60 minutes in the gym or 12, 15, 20 minutes to improve dramatically your nutrition intake, your digestive health, your overall health. I don't think people appreciate how much these 15 and 20 minutes each day on additional time spent cooking or preparing food or juicing, how those minutes, that time, exponentially add up in terms of additional longevity, quality of life within that longevity, and reduced medical expenses later in life.
I honestly, I couldn't say enough about that. I mean, I have, and I continue to transform my life every day because I put money in the bank. I put nutrition in the cells every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes all the difference.
I'm super pumped about breaking out my juicer again and getting it going. Do you only recommend juicing raw veggies, or can they be frozen? Okay, only raw. All right, cool.
The only thing there's very little processed food that I will ever recommend. And I use frozen berries if I don't have. I always make sure I have frozen berries in the freezer if I need them, if I don't have fresh.
Right.
But why is that secondary? Frozen is for the birds. And I see people talking about making smoothies with frozen kale. Let me explain to you. This is no joke. You are literally taking in, now we're not talking religion here. We're talking about common sense. We're talking about literally taking in the nutrition that whoever created this big universe, like there's things that grow out of the earth that actually offer us value. Why would we destroy that value? Why would we think that it processed on any level, it would have the same vitality? And see, that's the electricity that it brings into our body. Like, we're electric beings.
Sure.
Everything that happens in our body is a circuitous effect from the fuel we bring in. And if we bring in electricity from the sun, from the rain, from minerals from the earth, I mean, it's a no-brainer. But we're so far, this modern society that we live in, we're so far off track that everything's got to be convenient. Everything's got to be fast. And guess what? 1 out of every 2 Americans has a chronic disease.
Right.
1 out of every 4 Americans has 2 or more chronic diseases. 7 out of 10 will die of a chronic disease.
So, but you were saying about the frozen kale or the frozen veggies.
No good.
Got it.
Because of what I just said. That they're let me say, what would be a good analogy? Take an apple, put it outside and freeze it. You can see that there's something that's happened. It's transformed. It's changed. Look, we can just go to a bag of strawberries. Take the bag of strawberries out of the freezer. Does it look like a fresh strawberry?
No.
So, or do you think that, how could we think that we could get the same vibrant electricity if it's been taken out of its natural element and put in a different element? It's just not the same electricity. It's just not the same vibrancy.
Beautiful. So we got the juicing, we got the smoothies, and then now we're moving on to green salads. So
now we're talking about literally making a salad for yourself that's the size of that you would normally, you'll laugh. And I laugh all the time. That's a key component. If you say it's hard, it will be hard. If you say this is fun, it will be fun. And there's times I can't help but post pictures of things because I'm laughing so much. Like, this is so delicious. And so I make a salad that's literally in like a big giant pasta bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And I load it up with all of my favorite vegetables, loaded with greens, loaded with, because my palate has gotten so clean, I taste food differently.
Yeah.
And I will put things in like radicchio, which is a bitter, it's not green, but it's from the leafy green family. It's a bitter red leafy lettuce type of thing, radicchio. And I love spicy, so I always put hot peppers, olives, especially unsulfite, no sulfite olives, peppers, sprouts. Sprouts are before that plant really grew, so the nutrition is consolidated. Sprouts are one of the best things you could add in. So what I do, Tanner, is I fill this bowl with red peppers, cucumbers, all these fresh vegetables, sprouts, and then I will put on a big healthy handful of hemp seeds. Avocado, always avocado. And do you know what? 2 fun things I would love to share with your listeners.
Share them.
Instead of salad dressing, put warm marinara sauce over it.
Oh, wow.
You want to have pasta, but you don't want to eat the pasta, but you love that marinara sauce. You love that kind of soupy, saucy thing. Put that over the salad. Oh my God, you won't believe it. Salsa. Salsa.
That's so funny. So a couple years ago, another blind friend and I, we shot this YouTube video, and I was just kind of promoting him and what he does for his family. And we went in and into his kitchen in his house, and we cooked a meal, and this low carb chicken parm, and and it's like, yeah, we just replaced the noodles with these veggies. It was so good. So I'm gonna get that linked up on the show notes. I'm gonna get the Bed Bath and Beyond opportunity for the juicer linked up. Everything that we talked about.
Perfect.
And Carol is doing some great work over at her website, carolegan.com. She is connecting with
Tanner, it's Carol-Egan.com. There's a little hyphen in between.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll thank you for clarifying. CAROL-EAGAN, right?
EGAN.
EGAN. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I'm going to get all that linked up on the show notes page because, creators, if you're feeling a little run down a little bit, like you're not bouncing back like you used to, that isn't an effect of you being in your 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever. It is probably due to what you ate today, maybe yesterday, and definitely last week. So, Carol, do you have any words of wisdom before we wrap it up that you would say, hey, if you take away one thing and you want to improve your health today, what would that be?
Take away?
Yeah. What would you say, for creators that want to get started right now, today?
So it's always a math equation, what you put in and what you take out. So I would recommend one of the Holy Trinity things, the juice, the smoothie, or the salad. So if you could add one of those in starting today, and if you could take out one thing, that would be either gluten, dairy, or sugar. All three, those are the three in order top common toxic trigger foods, meaning they're irritating your digestive wall. If you could take one out and add one thing in and play with that, see how that helps. And of course, if that you notice some benefit, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you build that or develop on that.
Absolutely. Can we get your email linked up on the show notes page? Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. It's simply Carol@Carol-Egan.com.
Perfect. Creators, let's give a round of applause to Carol for dropping some wisdom on us today. She is quite the creator, and she's doing some great work. And I love how her work is helping other people create more meaning, more fulfillment, and more opportunities in their lives. Carol, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You remember when you were a kid and that one person you looked up to gave you a compliment? The best compliment you can give me right now is by sharing this. I look up to you, and it would mean the world to me if you would share this right now.